The freedom of speech is a sacrosanct right which should never be limited, never persecuted, never regulated, and actually I believe it should be encouraged and strictly protected. However, the circumstance where some people get eventually offended because of what other people say is pretty much an inevitable outcome of the freedom of speech. Considering how people have so many different and divergent beliefs, opinions, and ideas about so many things. This means that having and exercising the right of saying what we want to say, of criticizing, and eventually even mocking, when mocking is intelligently done, of course, and focused on making hopefully people reason a bit better about broken logic and fallacious ideas. To exercise this right is to offend someone, more or less. This is inevitable. However, a common error I see taking place so often, if not always, pretty much all over the place, is that error in logic that indeed takes place when people talk about freedom of speech, while probably most people are prone to support it by declaring, supporting its value as a modern important achievement in our civilization, when the inevitable link between freedom of speech and freedom to offend gets highlighted. I mean, the inevitability intrinsic in freedom of speech implying processes of offending and getting offended. When this link gets highlighted, it seems many people tend to take a step back and reevaluate the contents by even thinking about some kind of limitations, perhaps. Ideological morality, unfortunately, and even politics, at this stage, usually tend to interfere, to take over, and the outcome of this, yes, no, wait, maybe not, is nothing but great psychosocial confusion. This is a great problem, particularly nowadays, because wherever there is confusion, especially about delicate arguments, such as the matter of human rights, free speech, and so on, and what must be allowed or not, and such, wherever there is confusion, people tend to take positions instead of investing a calm but profound reasoning and logical skills so to bring about clarity, the best they can, the best we can. So what we tend to do nowadays, instead of bringing about personal reasoning and clarity, we cling instead to videos, maybe, material we find online, podcasts, digital sources of information of all sorts. Maybe we cling to the many Sam Harris or Jordan Petersons, with all due respect for them, of course, beautiful speakers. Or we cling to the left or to the right, the goodness or the harshness, the so-called badass attitudes, or the political correctness-based litanies, and so on. This is actually very bad. First of all, because it leads the healthy and possible clear reasoning astray, moving away from the actual arguments, and secondly, because it foments further and further ideological divisions. I will even call them digital ideologies, which is what is happening right now, since we have not only a physical, real self, but we also have a digital self, and we usually prioritize the digital self instead of the real self. Anyway, this being said, I will also highlight the fact that freedom of speech, being it not really studied and understood in educational manners and personal development, can really generate a lot of confusions, pettiness, and even hypocrisy. Because many people misconceive it greatly. Whether deliberately or stupidly, they misconceive the freedom of speech by interpreting it as a freedom to say whatever they want to say, no matter what. Now, considering a possibility like this, imagine I am a kind of public figure, more or less a so-called influencer, and I want to publicly say that my former partner, for instance, is a perverted person, or a misogynist, or an abuser. This, by the way, abuser happens quite often nowadays, unfortunately. It is very trendy. Or whatever the claim I want to shape and deliver is. If I really believe I'm exercising the freedom of speech, then I'm not exercising the freedom of speech at all, because this is not free speech. This is freedom of accusing with no evidence provided. Therefore, it is freedom of slandering, freedom of torturing, freedom of inflicting pain, freedom of twisting the perception of the readers, the listeners, the followers, especially the credulous ones, in order to disintegrate someone's reputation or gain whatever kind of benefits, whether it be consensus, attention, or just image. People like Alex Jones, the famous conspiracy theorist, do not quite only exercise the freedom of speech, they do exercise the freedom of accusing certain people without providing any evidence, and often the allegations are quite serious, including claims such as human sacrifices, and so on with insane rubbish. This is not something about freedom of speech at all, because if we allow something like this to happen, then we will have a total collapse of the laws and the regulations that are aimed to protect people from crazy accusations and venomous, dangerous slandering, especially those people that are fragile, they don't have any means to react or to deliver publicly their voice, their version of the facts. But nevertheless, I basically never hear the argument regarding freedom of speech going together along debates or interviews and discussions with a multi-logical perspective and a meta-memetic analytical framework of analysis. And this is a very bad attitude, because in most cases this leads to polarization and black and white approaches.